If you all join me, salute to the flag. Ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to mute. I know. All right. So members of council participating primarily via Zoom, and this meeting is also streamed on City's website, YouTube, and Spectrum Channel 2. And the public will be given opportunity to address the council during public participation pertaining to the item on the agenda, which will be tax discussion. So, the roll call, please.
Councilmember Larson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ariano,
Gotta ask God for that one.
did I lose her?
I didn't see her anymore. Did she go to common core?
I think we may have momentarily lost Councilmember Ariano, so I'll let you know when she does come back on the
Thank you.
line. Councilmember Nazrati,
Here?
Councilmember Esquer,
Yes.
Mayor Bublak.
Yes. All right, we will go to, is she back? Come back, council member. Ah, technology. We're going to hold off for just a second and try and get her back on so that we're all here together. Virtually. Oh, that's cool.
Are you on the phone? On the Zoom system?
I am.
Okay, you're fine, you're fine. I'm like, someone is like spoofing you.
If you want to do one as the presentation for in here and then one as the Zoom, that would be great. If that.
I have it like that right now. You want to switch?
Yeah, no, I think that's fine because we still have the screens up at the dais too. And then will that at least push out to what people are seeing once the presentation starts? Okay, perfect.
All right. So now that we have all of us back here we go. Roll call for declaration of conflicts of interest, please.
Thank you, and I will confirm that Councilmember Ariano, you are on the line for roll call.
Correct.
Thank you very much. For declaration of conflicts, Councilmember Larson,
No.
Councilmember Ariano,
No.
Councilmember Nazrati,
No?
Councilmember Esquer,
Councilmember Esquer,
Sorry, here's on mute. No conflicts.
thank you very much. Mayor Bublak.
All right, none, thank you. Approval of agenda is posted or amended. Got a motion over here. You guys out there for a second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Motion is second. Clerk, call the roll, please.
Approving the agenda as posted, Councilmember Larson,
Yes.
Councilmember Ariano,
Yes.
Councilmember Nazrati,
Yes.
Councilmember Esquer,
Yes.
Mayor Bublak.
Yes. All right, prior to the public participation, we have a few words by our sponsor, the clerk.
Thank you, Mayor. Any member of the public will be given an opportunity to address the council concerning any item that has been described in the notice for this particular meeting. For those who are interested in addressing the council, please use the raise your hand feature, or you may also dial *9 from your telephone keypad once the mayor has opened public comment and before she closes public comment. Members of the public will be allotted 3 minutes for comments, and comments will be taken in the order of which they are received. When it is the member's turn to speak, they will receive a prompt indicating that their line has been unmuted, and that's when their 3 minutes will begin. We request members who choose to address the council to please provide their first and last name in the event that there's any follow-up needed. However, that is not mandatory.
Great. I will open the public participation at this time. Are there callers?
Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a caller with the last 4 digits of 1274.
Mr. Treeweiler, how are you?
I'm fine, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. Milt Treeweiler here. Mayor and council, please put a 0.5% sales tax measure on the ballot and let the people of Turlock make the decision. A 1/2 cent per sales tax will not have a negative impact on any citizen, store owner, or business in Turlock. Our city will still have a sales tax rate that's average for the valley. This tax will generate about $6.5 million a year for the city. We can't keep asking our city police, fire, parks, and rec departments to keep cutting personnel and doing more work with less people. We've had many problems here in Turlock. Our road conditions, homelessness, and crime are some of the more serious problems. There's also many deferred maintenance issues in our city buildings, including leaky roof problems. The city did an economic development survey a little over 2 years ago and found that in a year's time, thousands and thousands of people in the area come to our city to shop in our stores and eat in our restaurants. This will allow them to contribute to our city street problems. When I go shopping in a store or go to a restaurant, I don't think about how much sales tax will be. I think about how much I can spend on the meal and what I want to eat, or how much I can spend on a pair of shoes and how well they fit. In conclusion, a 0.5% sales tax is a fair and just tax on all income levels. It's an equitable tax on both high and low income people. Those with more money can buy more things, and those with less money can afford to live in their homes and rentals and live in dignity. Mayor and council, please put a 0.5% sales tax on the ballot and let the people make the decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Treeweiler. Is there any other caller?
If any other member of the public would like to address the council, please raise your hand. Thank you, Mayor. At this time, there's no other member of the public that would like to address the council.
Am I to believe you? Okay, I will close the public hearing. Actually, you know what, I'm just going to leave it open because we're going to end up having it still with all the tax discussion. So we'll just leave it open and I'll introduce it back again. But for the time being, let's just get on with the ballot measure workshop. Mr. Wells.
I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Pitt, who will lead the discussion. I'll kick it off and bring back to me for some follow-up items, and we'll look for some discussion with the council and look for some direction.
Ms. Pitt.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wells. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I want to take a moment to kind of bring everyone back up to speed about where we are. As you might remember, that very early on in the year, January, we had a host of community meetings in each one of the council districts where citizens were able to come and participate in sharing some of their concerns and looking at potential solutions to address those concerns. At that point in time, the City of Turlock contracted with Grassroots Lab and FM3 Research, which is Fairbank, Maslin, Mullen, Metz and Associates. They're a almost 40-year-old polling firm who's done thousands of polls in California over those 40 years to conduct a community issue survey. As a result, if you could move the slide, there we go, thank you. What came out of a multitude of information about priorities in terms of community issues and such, but in the bottom line was that the survey told us that more than 7 in 10 voters believe the city has at least some need for additional funding to provide city services. This conversation was further illuminated by information that was provided by interim city manager Michael Cook on a per capita spending chart with a bunch of pie, as the council might remember, pie charts about what the per capita spending is in Turlock in terms of running, we spend to run the city. And we were the second smallest pie chart on that particular page. So in the survey, with a plus or minus 4.9 margin of error, that this was, this graphic that's currently on the screen was what it demonstrated, that 74% of the people believe that there is some great or some need to add additional revenue for city services. The language that was included in the poll was draft language to basically reflect a very broad oversight in terms of anything and everything that a general measure, tax measure could be included. And the measure language is indicated up on the screen. The polling did actually ask the question on a 1 cent sales tax as opposed to a half-cent sales tax, as one of the speakers just mentioned, but in fact that it did end up with that very high 68% approval. So what happens next is we end up in March and COVID hits. And so what does that really mean as we had just finished the March California presidential primary and what it showed. So I had an opportunity to participate in the next slide please, in a webinar that was hosted by FM3, Grassroots Lab, and Avenue Insights, who is actually our own city sales tax consultant firm. And what the idea around the webinar is to examine trends both in sales tax trends and what we could expect to see or not see in the coming quarters, as well as what happened in the March presidential primary and subsequent polling that has happened given the landscape of an international pandemic. So what it showed in these early trends was that that most of the measures were performing as well as they had been before the pandemic, and that they were largely held steady. That their renewal of existing sales tax appeared to be particularly strong, and that the more focused taxes on things like marijuana and such was winning, but with less support. So I would actually refer you to page 9, 10, and 11 in the COVID revenue option pages that further sort of reflect those thought processes. So in essence, over half the people believe that the worst was yet to come. 29% the worst was over. But the interesting thing was, then this was a poll taken across all of California in many of the jurisdictions where FM3 does polling, that places with small, medium markets, small towns, Central Valley, independents, Republicans, and conservatives all believe that the worst is over, and that those are actually pretty reflective of kind of the electorate of Turlock itself. Also, that people remain more concerned about getting sick, and a very even spread between concerns about getting sick and economic impacts, and kind of the balancing of all of that. But in essence, on page 21 of that document in your handout, it does talk about the high level of engagement of voters for the November 2020 election. And in fact, on a scale of 1 to 10, more than 83% believe they're a number 10 and highly engaged in what's going on in terms of the election and political conversations and decisions. So with that, also during that the springtime, the former interim city manager and I and their staff had met with a group of community members that were collected to represent a range of viewpoints from divergent community groups, city council districts, stakeholders, business interests, and following, to look at 3 parts to their a question. Outreach and public efforts, a common understanding of municipal finance and budget, as well as reviewing aspects of key general funded operations, prioritizing community expectations, as well as reviewing fiscal strategies and constraints associated with the delivery of services at the current and increased levels. So that is the CPAC report, and it was just received very late last week. And I'll actually turn it back over to City Manager Wells to kind of further illuminate that report.
Thank you, Ms. Pitt. So the CPAC's, the Citizens Public Advisory Committee, 17 members and staff that participated, former Mr. Cook, as well as Ms. Pitt and Allison Martin had helped in that process. The 17 community members met over the course of several months. Of course, I was not involved in that conversation, was handed a draft report soon after I got here, completed the review of that report, sent it back to the committee with some input, really just some notes of getting myself up to speed. That report was finalized over this last weekend, was transmitted back to the city and to the city council on Monday morning. So first off, I want to thank the committee for all of their diligent efforts. That was a heavy lift for them to meet with staff, dig through tons of information and try to narrow it down into a readable document with some discernible and measurable items that can be considered. So with it just being received on Monday, obviously we have not had the ability to, unpack, as noted here on the slides, and dive deeper into the proposals in terms of, what are items that are implementable immediately, which are, medium term, long term, but it is a very helpful perspective to the big picture of, the concerns and the issues that we're facing as a city. So the thought process right now, depending on the direction we see from council, would be to bring that report back to council on June 9th with some discussion after staff has got a chance to kind of dive into it and provide, let council give us some direction on how we want to handle the report. And there's a number of options that we could be considering there, and we want to get some direction on the report and how the report may impact this discussion as we move forward on a tax measure consideration. So like I said, the report was just received, and again, I thank the committee for their outstanding work, and then this would be brought back for council consideration as part of June 9th as you develop the framework if this is to move forward. So with that kind of overview, so as Ms. Pitt indicated, the polling data from February, then some folks can argue about the scientific method and methodology. Was a reputable firm that did it, conducted it in a scientific way. The data that we've now updated with the COVID crisis still appears to show a reasonable support based on, statewide trends. At this point, before we take any further action from a staff perspective, this is really the opportunity to check in with the council and kind of measure the temperature, really kind of an opportunity for a thumbs up, thumbs down to move to the next level. So the next level and next steps would be June 9th, providing information to the council for an item for resolution of approval to consolidate the ballot and put this sales tax measure on the November ballot. That has to be to the county by basically the first week in July. So the meeting in June 23rd will be the last time those deadlines are reflected in the staff report. So number of details there, but really want to have the council discussion, take your public input, and the first primary question is thumbs up, thumbs down, and then a couple follow-up questions as we put the information together, what information you would like to see in that conversation for June 9th. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions and go from there.
Okay, what are some questions you have? We'll get to our statements and stuff after we close the public hearing. So are there questions for staff? Colleagues out there?
I'm good.
Okay, then let's go ahead and just open it to the public. Once again, it's still open, but anybody wishing to call and have your 3 minutes of statement, let us know.
For any member of the public who is interested in addressing the council regarding this item, please raise your hand. Thank you, Mayor. At this time, I do not have any member of the, excuse me. That's the ticket. That's how I attempt to close it. And then, yeah. I have the caller with the last four digits, 8383.
Caller 8383? No, yeah.
Hi, Mayor, members of the council, it's Mike Warda.
Hi, Cheryl.
Hi, everybody, it's Cheryl, yes. If the effort here is to move forward with spending city money on a sales tax, and I'm not sure where we fell, but I was hearing stories about the report from the outside committee was recommending like a 3% increase on the sales tax. That was a 3% first year, 2% second year, 1% 1 year. I mean, I've spoken to people that are on that committee, and I don't think there's support for something like that. I can tell you in the business community, if you're going to buy a truck and spend $50,000 or $60,000 on a truck in Turlock, and you've got a sales tax increase, especially if it's a 3% increase, and if it's not that much, cut me off here, but if you're even considering that, that's a $2,000, $1,800 difference. They're going to go to Modesto. They're going to go to Merced. They're not going to spend the money here, and you're going to lose all the sales tax revenue. The governor is placing all kinds of restrictions on every business, saying your capacity can only be this. So they're not operating at full capacity, not just car dealers, but I'm talking about the general businesses, retail, everything. So on top of the fact that they can barely make a profit and will probably just operate to stay in business, increasing the sales tax is going to reduce the number of people that are even going to want to shop there. We have a lot of people that come to Costco, that come to this area from Modesto. The second they see a 9-10% sales tax, they're just going to deal with the traffic in Modesto and stay in Modesto. They're not going to come to Turlock and shop in Turlock. It's a killer. I mean, any kind of a sales tax, and people may say we don't have a choice because we're in these dire straits with Corona, with everything. Yeah, we are in dire straits. There's no doubt about it. But taxing businesses further or taxing people further is not the solution to this. We need to figure out ways to help all these businesses get open, stay open, figure out a way to get around whatever the governor's doing. We've had some proposals about getting the streets open so people can put out inventory out there. We have more people get more access to retail, to whatever we're doing. But you're going to hear from the car dealers, every car dealer, used car dealers, and we've got a lot. They're not going to deal with this. It's not something. It's not a good idea. And I'm fearful that it's just going to create more problems in the city and not resolve anything. So before you vote to spend city money on the sales tax, a sales tax increase, I urge you to spend some more time contacting folks and talking to folks and figuring it out. But because I don't think it has a prayer of winning in November. Thanks.
Thank you. Next caller?
Thank you, Mayor. For the next caller, I have Mr. Franson.
Mr. Franzen, are you there? Mr. Franzen?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to speak up and try to represent a lot of the people online. I do not see a lot of people jumping or even remotely supporting a sales tax, even in general. I don't know what this polling company did or how many people, but I mean, you can look across the spectrum of all the public pages, whether Turlock Journal, Turlock City News, the mayor's page, and all I see is a lot of opposition. And so I'm going to challenge that poll. And considering that I've done polling and whether it's predicting Josh Harder or the last president or our current mayor, so I'm using the same data that has proven to be correct with all of those elections. And again, they don't align with essentially my personal views, really. But also another thing, too, I got to advocate for the local businesses. So you just heard from Mr. Warda, and it's the same thing that I'm hearing as well. But there was an outside proposal that was talking about a 3% tax, even a 1% though. Like I've heard that it could bring in, could be about $8 to $15 million, and a 3% increase would bring in about $45 million. Now that sounds good for one entity with about 375 employees. I can't even picture how that's possible to have that much money, well, except for that you have PERS. But if it was that minimal of amount, businesses worry about increasing their price by even a small fraction because of competition. So that's $45 million that could be going into local businesses and their employees. Another thing is too, I haven't heard anyone talk about it online. We're going to be at 9 or 10 or 11% sales tax. We will get killed all day, every day online. That's the future, by the way. So even if it's like distribution centers like Amazon or Super Walmarts or whatever, we got to look at that too. And I haven't heard anyone talk about that. That's one of the killers of a lot of economies right now, online. And we saw it with COVID-19. Everyone's going online. So I ask that you don't look at this and you look at restructuring like we did during the Great Recession. That's the key to provide services to the community and keep the money in people's hands to actually keep the economy going. So anyways, those are my suggestions and my data that I have, and I ask that you consider that instead, please.
Thank you. Next caller, should there be one?
Thank you, Mayor. For the next caller, I have the last 4 digits, 5800.
Ms. Jackson? Hello? 580?
Hi.
No. Hi.
Hi, this is Devendra Bains from Turlock Auto Plaza from Dublin Automotive Group Inc.
Yes, sir.
I just heard, so I joined this, the call a little bit later on about this tax increase. That's going to be killer to the businesses as we deal with the large ticket items. So we have to struggle to get the people from other counties to do the sales in Turlock. And for city benefit, for our benefit, for everyone's benefit, just going to kill it completely. Large ticket item is not going to deal with this. That's one way to start pushing especially the automobile dealership out of the Turlock area. I was planning on to bring a few more franchises, which the land I purchased. I'll be very much alarmed if that actually does happen, because that's a killer. Your profit margin is shrinking day by day. Negotiations from the customers are increasing day by day. This tax increase is going to be definitely a killer to the automobile business, and automobile business is the backbone of any the city or the country or the state or whatnot. So think about this very seriously before anyone, even single vote, goes against to increase the tax. Car dealers, large ticket items will be very alarmed for the future expansion in Turlock. Thank you.
Mr. Baines?
Yes.
If you wouldn't mind, through this COVID, can you kind of share what percentage you went down? I mean, I know that the road situation also has been problematic for you, so maybe even just these few months, how much you're down roughly? I don't want to know your exact numbers, but if you could share with us.
Absolutely. So my service was down about 30%, and sales are down about 70%. So we're surviving through. It's happening, with the PPP loans and whatnot. We got a little bit of money. We furloughed employed. About more than half of them come back. So we're in. I understand we are in this for long haul. We are in this together. But when something like this comes to a businessman, someone else going to stick into their pocket through the sales tax, that is alarming.
Thank you. Our next caller?
You're welcome.
If any other member of public would like to address the council, please raise your hand. Mr. Bates?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, I just want to make sure I was unmuted. Just two scenarios. Scenario A, you choose not to put a tax on the ballot. Or scenario B, you put the tax initiative on the ballot and it fails. In either one of those scenarios, does the council or will the council have a plan of action if a tax either isn't on the ballot or it fails? So my question is more of a statement, and the statement is, it's good to be optimistic, but I think as the council goes forward, you will be asked what will happen if the tax measure fails. Do you have a plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bates. Did you want to go over and speak? Is there one there? Yeah, go ahead. Sure, absolutely. Hold on the call. We'll have Mr. Red speak. That would help.
Just push the button.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Tim Red with Turlock Associated Police Officers. I would urge this council to follow Mr. Wells' recommendation to put something on the ballot. I understand there's been people calling in for and against, but in reality, we have almost 75,000 people in this city alone, and to actually field those calls tonight might give you the pulse of whether or not it's going to pass or not. But to put it out to the members of the public, voting community, to figure out whether or not they do or do not want it. I think it's very important for the public to understand that this is not a tax to give us fatter salaries or take care of healthcare issues, as I've seen the propaganda out on our social media sites lately. It's about bringing services back. It's about bringing, at least from the police department standpoint, the fact that National Night Out, Blue Santa, having our community academy again, things like that. We are bringing cannabis willingly to our city to sell. Those basic businesses are going to want the police department to do something about the illegal black market that's going to thrive. If we don't have a means to fund positions to take care of those problems, are we then going to start getting complaints from the cannabis community that their needs are not being met, that we're not representing their interests as well? We don't pass any type of funding revenue measure, we're going to lose officers. And eventually, I hate to see it happen, but we could all very well be wearing tan and green. And we would not get anywhere near the service level that the community enjoys at this moment. Even with these dire straits with COVID and everything else, you're not going to see the same service level being patrolled by another agency that you do now. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have callers left?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Camara?
Mr. Camara, are you there? Mr. Camara?
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, lean in just a little bit more.
Oh, okay. How about now?
Perfect.
Is that better? Okay. To make comment on what was mentioned previously by the gentleman that just spoke, the notion and the frustration of the community and the fear that they aren't simply being taxed to fund greater salaries or to ensure medical benefits to city staff and various departments. Because of the lack of trust that currently exists between Turlock's current elected leadership and the public, in order really to convince them to buy on and be supportive would be an emergency service specific allocated tax that would go to fire, that would go to police. And then again, when you have individuals within these departments that are making upwards of $350,000 a year with benefits, of course, calculated into that, that doesn't instill a sense of frugality, a sense of humility amongst the leadership of a town that is financially hurting. So the idea that that money won't be used in inappropriate ways it can't go to the general fund, because the general fund is simply being used, or at least it's perceived to be used, as a slush fund. And what I don't understand is yesterday there was mentioned that there was a surplus. There was a certain amount of money that the city was in a financially better situation than originally anticipated. Why are there positions that are left vacant when we're sitting on money that we didn't think we had? That was just something that was odd, because ultimately the numbers that were presented at yesterday's meeting were far more rosy, far more positive, and we're lacking services, right? The fire department has been complaining for a long time that staffing numbers are below what they should be. Why are we sitting on a surplus? So again, perception is very important, and because of the lack of trust that currently exists, I don't know where public sentiment would be in terms of support for additional tax. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any new additional callers?
I have a caller by the name of Debbie.
Debbie, are you there? Caller Debbie?
I am unmuted. I'm here.
Excellent, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Good. I have concern as we talk about increasing the sales tax, and it seems like we are becoming further divided in our community. The amount of money that is paid, and certainly I think city employees deserve everything that they earn. But compared to the private sector, there's a huge discrepancy. People are struggling to buy health insurance. And I know that that's been a big topic in the town of Turlock, but it's a real issue for the private sector. And until we address the true problem, which is the public unions, you're going to be gone one day, Mayor. Andrew Nostrati is going to be gone. Toby is going to be gone. But the public unions remain, and we still have to deal with the problem. And no one ever addresses that root issue, and I wish that we could. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Debbie.
Hey, Mayor,
Yes.
just as a reminder, if somebody has spoke, then we're not required. We don't typically have them speak again. We don't want speakers going back or attacking each other's positions. So we just want to hear what they have to say, and we don't want people attacking each other. So
Understood. Do you have any further callers then?
Thank you, Mayor. I have Mr. Puffer.
Mr. Puffer. Mr. Puffer?
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes, sir. Let's do it.
Oh, how about that? I might be figuring this thing out. It was nice to see some union representation in the room tonight. A couple comments. I don't think I'd ever heard of anybody saying that they were going to put a 2 or 3% increase on sales tax on the ballot. I think that was just from the CPAC recommendations. I've only heard always about a 1 cent, and I wouldn't worry about auto people going up to Modesto to save any money, because Modesto just recorded a $20 million loss, and they're going to be floating a 1 cent or 2 cent sales tax increase in the next year or so. I'll put money on it. Having said that, I don't think a 1 cent sales tax is going to have much chance of passing unless you get your house in order first, and that means PERS and health care. And the unions are going to have to realize that this is not 1980 anymore, that, as Debbie had alluded to before me, private industry has already transitioned where individuals are paying much more of that, if not all of their health care and retirement, and that public unions are going to have to get your constituents to realize they are going to have to become responsible for the majority of their health care and retirement. And that's going to have to be done before September, before this thing goes on the ballot, if you want to have any chance of passing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Puffer. Any additional calls? Maybe. Maybe not.
Thank you, Mayor. I have Ms. Shaver.
Terry, are you there? Ms. Shaver?
Yes, hello.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Greetings to City Council members and citizens of Turlock. My name is Terry Shaver. It has been clear for a long time that declining reserves must be made up by creating another source of revenue. A sales tax adjustment is the most obvious solution. The question is the amount of the percentage. Proposals range from 1% to much less, and it's going to be necessary to get the amount right. Ask for too little, and we'll be asking again in a few years. 1/2 cent may be 1/2 cent may be palatable and a good compromise in order to get it passed. However, 1% is the amount that will most quickly bring us in the measure support needed, and the revenue support needed, and will hold that budget steady in a way to restore services and help keep us above board. It will take a commitment from the citizens. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shaver. Additional calls?
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, there is no other member of the Thank you, Mayor. Give me one moment.
Right.
Mayor, I have Denise on the line.
Denise, are you there?
Hi, yes, I am. I am an independent sales rep. I work with retailers across, well, the globe actually, small and very large. And when it comes to the tax increases, I do understand the city needs funds. That is a top priority. But I would just like to say that I think the long-term interest, the best interest for Turlock, is for it to come from the success of the local businesses. In order to do that, it needs to be really viable to shop in Turlock. It needs to be viable that there's less regulation, less things holding people back from spending their money in Turlock. So I just want to put that out there. I am in touch with retailers across the country daily. And I see the ones thriving are the ones that have a lower, just a lower standard of living, just lower taxes, lower regulations for their businesses, lower housing property taxes. I think once the citizens have more money, our businesses will benefit. So it's more a matter of cutting expenses than it is adding on expenses to the citizens. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Potential next call?
If any other member of the public would like to address the council on this item, please raise your hand. Thank you, Mayor. At this time, there is no other member of public that would like to address the council.
Okay, I'm closing the public hearing.
Madam Mayor? Madam Mayor?
Yes.
I just wanted to point out with regard to vehicle sales. So in the 1980s, when cities started poaching each other's car dealerships, the state of California decided to create disincentives for doing that. So they modified the state's revenue tax code so that if you buy a car, the sales tax is split between the point of sale, the jurisdiction of the point of sale, and the zip code of the buyer. So it isn't one of those things that you see 100% of the sales tax that comes from car dealerships, and also boats. So cars, that applies to cars and boats. It does not apply to recreational vehicles. But that was a disincentive. I mean, they do as a unit, and most of our car dealerships are certainly in our top 25. But in terms of what we actually receive, it's split depending on where the buyer lives.
Thank you.
And then I just want to add one more thing. So in order for us to generate $6 million in new sales tax revenue, we would need to increase our total sales in Turlock by $600 million in brand-new sales that does not cannibalize for any of our existing retail outlets. That would be more than 3 Costco's.
Wow. That's a lot. Okay, so what are you guys thinking? Little dialogue out there?
Yeah, I'll go if nobody's ready.
Go ahead.
I would say, I've been looking at the sales tax rates for all the counties in California. And our county rate is 7.875. Looks like Turlock, we're paying it looks like 7.88%. You got Sirius and Oakdale at 8.375. I don't like, somebody mentioned earlier, if you saw the article in Modesto B, I think this morning, Modesto's having their own share of issues. So I'm not sure that I'd be comfortable with a 0.5% increase, because I don't want to do this again next year or 2 years or 3 years from now. I think if we're going to go forward, it needs to be at least 1%. I don't think. In fact, I know I probably would not support a 2 or 3% increase. That would definitely put us. I think that'd get us all sent out of town on a rail, tar and feather days. But it's just, if we're going to, everybody keeps saying we need to find ways to increase the revenue, yet nobody's really shown us a method of doing that. And you just heard Marin say that okay, $600 million per year. Where are we going to generate that income in the next year or 2 or 3? So I think we need to go forward with the measure. Do I like paying more taxes? Absolutely not. But do I want our service levels to get back to where they were or better? Yes, I do. We need to look at something. We need to look at it hard. This is one of those hard decisions that's going to be on us. I think we need to go forward and pursue this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Other council members?
Yeah, I think to speak to what Mayor Bates said, what is our plan without the tax? I think no one gets elected to try and pass a tax. We know no one wants additional expenses in their lives. Cost of living is going up every year, and the thought of adding it is one that's going to be met with resistance in the community. But I'm just looking at the fiscal reality we're facing, and without new sources of revenue, we are going to see continued diminishing services. That's going to result in less presence from the police and a higher risks on the public safety standpoint. That's the kinds of things that scare me as a resident and as a council member, where you're looking at a Turlock that's not necessarily desirable to live in anymore. If we had that alternative plan in place, and even I know there's a conversation about looking at our expenses and figuring out ways to control those. That happens in parallel, and that's something that a conversation that we're actively, continuously working on. But even if you look at the CPAC report and any information that's been made available to us, with the best case scenario on saving side from expense perspective, we are still not closing that gap, and we are going to see continued decline in services. Unless someone here has an alternative plan in place, I don't want to make the decision as to what level of service the people are going to have. I think it's necessary with a split public that they are the ones that are given that opportunity.
Thank you. Other thoughts?
Sure. I think that especially going after this this budget situation that we just experienced for the 18 and 19 budget, that the problems we are dealing with in terms of our financial stability were ones that started a long time ago, and they have came to a head probably in the last couple of years. And there definitely could have been some proactive measures that were put in place from the council level. Because that didn't happen, and I've talked to some previous members of the Turlock Council, that the idea of a tax has been something that has been kicked down the road, and it's very clear with the surrounding communities that have increased their revenue, and it's also clear that our problem is in sustainable revenue. It's not one-time monies. It's not cutting more. We're at over a 10% vacancy rate. We are cutting customer hours in a growing city, in a dwindling reserve, in a growing city, in a growing business community. I don't see any other solution that can be implemented as quickly to save this city. And just like Officer Reed mentioned, wearing green and gray uniforms is something that could be in the foreseeable future with a lot of our services, and potentially the city itself, if we cannot figure out how to have a more sustainable form of revenue. We've already placed city resources toward exploring this option. We have a poll that went out that yielded very positive results from the community, and I think it shows the growing population of our community, diverse perspectives, and really what this community is ready for, and ready to be asked what they want out of their city government, and willing to put this my name behind it and this council behind it is something that will be yielded with criticism, rightfully so. But at this point, I don't see us having any other choice but to ask, because like I said, 10% vacancy rate, the surplus that was talked about in the public comment was salary savings from vacant positions that department heads chose not to hire, chose not to operate with the full staff that's needed for a city of our size. It was savings. It wasn't, and that would be the only option we have, just to Mayor Bates' point. If it does fail, or if it's not chosen to be put on the ballot, what is the next option? I don't know, and I haven't heard from anybody on this dais that has proposed any other alternative in terms of an immediate fix for our financial stability, because it's not an immediate problem. It's a long-standing problem that has been here for a very long time.
Anybody else? Anybody?
Becky, you're muted.
Can you hear me now?
There you go. Yes.
Okay, so the whole day has been spent going through prior YouTube videos and the document that was created by some very smart individuals a few years ago that kind of outlined what needed to happen. For some reason, it didn't take the leadership at that time did not maybe act on some very serious challenges that we're dealing with now. I don't know if it was a lack of leadership, a lack of education, but it was a lack of maybe understanding of what the ramifications were of not listening to a lot of our business leaders in the community. I was a part of the sales tax that we did, and I don't even remember what year, it was a few years back, that just failed by a very slim margin. And not to say if that would have passed that we wouldn't be right back here again because of the lack of leadership that we've had prior. So, you know, we really, as a council, need to put some, I think, really fiscally responsible caveats in if we do move forward with an ask, because the ask needs to be followed up with responsibility. Just because you pour more money into something doesn't mean that it's going to get spent wisely or spent independently of what should happen or needs to happen, and really depends on who's sitting up there in the seat. The mayor has publicly come out and said that she hasn't supported this, but she hasn't given us another plan to move forward on implementing our services that we need to get back up. Our budget that we went through yesterday will include a decrease in police services of 13 positions. This community cannot afford to have 13 less police officers on the streets. It just can't. I wouldn't feel good about going to bed at night knowing that we took 13 police officers off the street. Our fire department is run lean. I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of the work that they're doing. They stepped up to the plate. Can we cut a little bit more out of there? Maybe. Do we need to regionalize and make, see if we can find some other avenues to make the fire department function a little bit better? Yeah, that's something that our city manager needs to look at. But if we're going to go ahead and move forward with this, and I don't think it's a bad idea, there hasn't been a plan B. I think we need to work with the fiscal responsible individuals in this community. We're going to have to cut some salaries. We've already worked on the healthcare. We've had a healthcare change that will go through in July. This council, I'm very proud of, has taken a very hard line in making sure that we're not getting into a gray or a red area with our budget that we've had prior. I think all of our staff has stepped up to the plate and made sure that our services, although they have been lessened, that the community hasn't felt a huge turn in those services, but they will. It's coming. And with COVID, nobody really knows what this pandemic has brought to the table, and that there's a lot of what ifs. So I think I don't support a 3-2-1, not in this economy. I think that's too big of an ask with the ducks that we still need to get in a row. And I'm not willing to sacrifice our police department in order to just get by. If I have children, I want this community to thrive. I want it to look like it looks, now. I love this town. I want my kids to stay here and grow up in this town. We really need to be fiscally responsible with what we have been given. And if we do get a little more, we need to be fiscally responsible with that. That means that we're going to have to put some very hard caveats in to make sure that we are not paying for positions out of the reserves, that we are not paying for things that we don't need. We need to make sure that we have more land for people to build their businesses on. We can't be, closed off to development. We need to make sure that those development agreement or those developers are able to come in and, do it smartly. We don't want things just hodgepodge. That's why we have the city manager that we do. I'm very confident in the city manager that we have. But we need to make sure that those caveats are in place and that we're moving ahead, making the cuts that we need to make, And if we get a little bit extra, making sure we clearly define where we are going to spend that money and not have it rated like it's been rated in prior councils. So I would move forward with either a half cent or a 1 cent. That's something that I would vote for. I would not do a 3, 2, 1. We need to make sure there's caveats in place. If it passes, fine, but we need to be prepared for the latter. If it doesn't pass, we need to be prepared for that too. There needs to be an A and B solution. We don't have our cannabis money coming in, which we thought we were going to do. We don't have any of our county's property taxes coming back to us, which the mayor had talked about getting back in last October. So we need to make sure that we're doing the job that we were elected or appointed to do, and move forward from there.
Do you have any final thoughts?
The citizens oversight, public disclosure of spending, and all funds used locally in the language is, I think, a critical piece of this. We want to make sure that there is a citizens group that makes sure the spending of this new revenue reflects exactly what the public is asking for with new money. We have a lot of deferred maintenance in our buildings, but also we're talking about an infrastructure of the roads have been falling apart for a year, and we've never spent $1 in general fund money towards roads. This kind of flexibility and an additional revenue stream gives the public the ability to actually start seeing some progress in some of those areas that they've been asking for a really long time. So I don't want to be given a blank check and given a wish list of my things. I want it to come directly from the public. What is their desire? Where do they want it spent, so that it's a direct relationship between that tax and the public will.
So let me just say a couple things here. I don't want the public to think we are telling you, threatening you, that you will not have police and fire if we do something. If you don't give us a tax, we're going to do something crazy and not have you covered. Historically, taxes are for public safety and water. Simple as that. So we have to decide what services we're actually really going to focus on here. And I believe a half-cent sales tax is absolutely a waste of time, because all it's going to do is going to ongoing cost, right? Ongoing costs are not, it does nothing. Does it fix a road? Absolutely not. Is it going to hire another person? Absolutely not. We're so far behind. I don't see how we go forward at this point and tell people, trust us, because if we want to listen to this poll, it said they don't trust us. So if we're going to do this, let's show the public. We're doing a really good job with our budgets the last 2 years, or last year and a half. Let's prove to them that we are responsible and we are going to make the decisions that are critical to us getting through. I just see that the desperation of people that just have been sitting there without a job, not being able to do what they need to do to provide for their families, and we turn around and we just say, I know you're desperate and you don't have money, but please give us some. Let some time pass. If we can prove in the next year, we can put on a tax, but let's cut our cost. It's the revenue versus expenditures is the game here. We have to figure out what it is we're going to provide. Just because we've always done it one way does not mean today that we're supposed to do it the same way. We've got to find different ways to do this. And my no vote would not negate the public from voting on this, because I can already tell where this is going. But I just think that there are things I've been, attacked here for not having taken care of a taxation with the county. I'm one of 9 mayors, but we'll get there. So Mr. Wells would be, if he would share with you guys that there's a $2 million one-time thing, and it's a proprietary, so we can't discuss it. But there are potentials for some things right now, while we cut and make sure we're providing the services that we should be in 2020. I just don't think the people have the appetite right now. I don't think they have the trust for us. Let's clean up on aisle 1 first, and then look at it differently. Do we need money? Absolutely. But are we doing the right thing with the public's money right now? Not necessarily. Any position that's been open should have been reduced instantaneously. prove to the public that we're looking at it, we know what you're making or not making, let's do the right thing, size it up, make it understandable to them, and go forward from there. My plan is doing things like the 2 million I'm talking about that I'm hoping that the city manager will share with you at some point. And I'm trying to address these issues. Don't forget that we're only a couple weeks from asking you for more money for water rate. Where does it stop? And where's the logic? The luxury of certain things versus the necessity of others. We have to look at this in this totality. A half cent's not going to help us. It's not going to solve one thing other than putting your finger in the hole, hoping the water doesn't come out. We've really got to do a different way of services from this point on. So what is the will of the council?
Can I just clarify something? Because I had someone let me know that $2 million, a reduction of $2 million in our budget is actually 16 police officers and 2 community officers.
Thank you. What is the will of council? What's the direction?
I mean, the direction that we've verbalized here is, like you said, you think this, you think that. I want to let the people of Turlock make the decision and not make it for them.
I agree.
Okay, do you have enough to go forward?
Yeah, so we were looking, so as long as there's the direction to move forward, I believe there's 4 council members that indicated the direction to move forward, so the idea would be on June 9th, we would bring information to the council that would be unpacking the CPAC report, providing some detail on that report, and then putting the framework of what would be necessary for the council to take action on June 23rd to place an item on the ballot. So the key items for that discussion that we're looking for, is there any particular direction or in particular items that you need to help us provide that information for you on June 9th. So, the decisions that have to be made before June 23rd, we've talked a little bit about tonight. So the decision doesn't need to be made today, but what we need from a staff is what information are you looking for us to be able to, for you to make the educated decision on June 9th and ultimately on June 23rd. So, the 3 basics, right? The tax rate, the duration, and then the ballot language. And the creation of that ballot language is, obviously critical. And then the other piece of that conversation is the expenditure plan. So that can come a little bit later, but the ballot language and those 2 functions have to be included as part of that June 23rd action. So just if there's any particular items that would be helpful for those next 2 meetings, that's what we're looking for now, so we can formulate and put that package together. So that's where we look for any direction you have on that.
I think I would like to see council submit a expenditure plan to the city manager individually, so that we can come up with some clear-cut caveats and what we're going to be asking for, because I think right now we can't go forward without some very specific needs that haven't been met in the community, maybe per district. So I would like to see if our other council members would do that and send that to the city manager, so he can kind of compile a list to see what our feeling is from our constituents, what their needs are, and see if we can come to some type of conclusion. I know we have had some, opportunities to go out and meet with the public or whatever, but if the public wants to engage us, now would be the time to do it, to see really what we know, what's important in our districts, but maybe collectively we can come up with something that might help with that expenditure plan, and then really some caveats so that it can't be rated like it's been prior. So we really want to make sure that it's going, if we're going to ask, that it's going to where we say it's going. And I think all 4 of us have had those integrity moments where we've made sure that what we say, we want to follow through and do. So I would, like to see, our council spend some time and send some, maybe individual ideas, I guess, if you will, and see if we can come together collectively and make sure that the roadmap that we're going to follow is actually something that we can do and we should do. So the expenditure plan, how much we're going to, what we would support as a council. I think, we need to think about those things rather quickly, and the language needs to be very clear cut, I think. I don't know if anybody else agrees. But.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm going to want to see in order to decide what that tax rate is to be able to get some projections related to maintain the level of service that we have right now, incorporate fully any of the PERS unfunded and unfunded liabilities that we have in place, a full picture of what that looks like, if we could put it out for 5 years. Is that doable?
Yeah, I mean, the accuracy of forecasts, right?
Diminishes
over time,
yeah.
right? So and obviously COVID paints a very different picture when you're talking about sales tax of what, we've talked about yesterday and today. But yeah, we can put a projection together, just recognize the time that you're putting together has, it probably makes it less accurate, just as a starting point.
Any other thoughts?
On the link.
Yeah, just a couple of quick little things. First, just speaking for my district, our District 2 residents here, they understand sacrifice. And if this were to go forward and it passed, it's going to be a little bit of a hardship on people, but we know how to adjust. We've been doing it every day, all our lives, forever. We might need to tighten our belt a little bit and prioritize what we want to buy and what we don't want to buy. What we want is compared to what we need is compared to what we want. But I think one of the keys is that there's 5 of us up here, and we need to all show a united front here. If we get, the separation, that's the first thing that the residents of the entire city are going to look at. And the first thing they're going to say is, you guys can't even get your act together. Why should we help you? Personally, I wouldn't want to see like increases in salaries. I'd rather see more people on the streets. That's one of the things that I would be looking for. If we get some money, I want to see some streets fixed. Those are things that we saw were priorities. I want to see. At this point, I really don't know what we can solve as far as the homeless issue, because there's so many different people working on so many different areas. I don't know what we as a city can actually do. I think we need to prioritize our community in every place that we can. Wherever we're deficient, that's where we need to put money. And frankly, I don't think salaries is one of those priorities that I would necessarily support.
And I would be interested to, at that next meeting, to see what does citizen oversight look like. I want a presentation on how that would play out.
My experience in Sirius, I was part of Measure H, which was a half-cent special tax, so that was just on public safety. So for the past 6 years, I sat as part of the oversight committee that was enacted for that measure. So there's a couple different mechanisms or ways to do it. In that particular situation, the oversight committee was mandated by the measure to meet at least twice a year to review the annual audit and to review the annual budget. So those were their 2 primary functions. Over time, they added 2 additional meetings, so they met quarterly to review the expenditures, and the council ended up using that oversight committee to kind of be a vetting process where they would bounce ideas. Hey, can you ask Measure H committee if they're comfortable with that level of expenditure? And obviously it was all public safety driven, so especially when new technology came out for police or fire, the Measure H oversight committee provided a very valuable sounding board for the council to say, hey, does this meet the smell test of what the voters voted for? So that's how it was used in that situation, and there's several other good examples of structures and formats for how, you know, an oversight committee could be formulated. That's one that I'm obviously very familiar with, but there's several like that that can be kind of proactive or reactive depending on how the council wants to structure that input. And the CPAC had some discussion of their recommendations of how the members could be selected, but there's also how they're selected, their terms, you know, all of those provisions would need to be built into that concept.
Could we make a decision at that council meeting related to the establishment of the oversight committee and how it would function to give a little more assurance to the public?
It doesn't have to be made at the decision, you know, on the June 23rd decision, you have to put the item on the ballot. That has to be done at that point. Then going forward, there's a bunch of back-end work that needs to be done on the actual ordinance that would be the effective piece, and that's normally where the formation document would live. But what I would suggest is you're making a commitment to the oversight committee as part of that action, and that formation would follow as part of the ordinance that the city attorney would then be working on helping formulate that. So there is a little bit more time after that step to do the real detailed.
So you got about a month after.
After, right. Yeah, so you got to have that language all tiled up by, you know, kind of the end of July would be the thought process.
So returning, I would love to see the language related that kind of some language options that gives us the most secure way to assure the public that they're going to be involved in the spending of this potential new revenue.
Having final language, I have a hard time committing to final language by June 23rd, but at least a framework and an outline, we definitely can have that.
Okay.
So can I guess I just want to get clarification because I'm going to have to draft this. Are you want those assurances actually in the ballot language, or do you want that in a separate ordinance that would be the way that it's involved? So, and I say this because I've made commitments to some, you know, members of the public in terms of how much this would cost. The more we make this really intricate on the ballot side in terms of restricting how that money gets used, it gets more complicated. The ballot measure gets longer, things of that nature.
Right. I don't think the language of the ballot measure should include all of the details of it, but as soon as possible, as a group, to establish those and set them in writing. You know. But I think the language that was put in place that has requiring audits until ended by voters with citizens' oversight and public disclosure of spending, with all funds being used locally. That's the kind of stuff that, you know, if I see that, and I pay attention to the council meetings and see what's being done proactively to get those things put in place, I would have a high degree of confidence in the spending.
I have a couple things.
So my recommendation we put. My recommendation that we put that kind of information. It'd be my recommendation that we put the oversight committee stuff in the ballot measure so that voters have those assurances. But all of the additional stuff that Councilmember Ariano was talking about, that some of the other council members are talking about, I'd rather have that in a separate ordinance about the way that it's being implemented, because I think that it will overly complicate and make extremely long the actual ballot measure itself. So again, in an effort to be completely 100% transparent with the public and to make sure that I'm meeting your expectations, it would be a very simple ballot measure where you'd be setting the percentage. It would go into the general fund with citizen oversight, and then there would be a subsequent ordinance that you guys could put in place that could further restrict the council and how it could be used. But the ballot measure in and of itself would be fairly straightforward. And so I just want to make sure that before I go back and put something together, that that's the direction that I have, and everybody, we're all on the same page.
And you don't have to make that decision today, but that's what we're going to need that decision on the 9th. You need to give us some direction so that on the 23rd you're making that final decision.
Yeah, that sounds good, because I don't want all the money going to legal costs either.
I like it.
I made the commitment, but I think Terry and a couple other folks are going to hold me to it. So if I'm going to exceed it, I better say something and say why right now. So.
a couple things, Toby, that I want to see in that projection phase that Councilmember Nasrati was mentioning, that 5 years, is an actual sustainable way to fund road reconstruction, and how that would look coming out of our general fund. What's a reasonable number? Probably something to consult Nathan on. I just think that what we've learned through this last round of kind of passing out our road funding is that we are so far behind, and and the history of our general fund, that there's never been a line item before it. So I think that's something that I think the voters and the citizens of Turlock deserve. And I'm sure that everybody that's knocked on their door for asking for their vote for the last 5 to 10 years have probably said they want to figure out a way to get that to happen. So it's about time to see how that would actually work. And my other point was to construct that citizens committee, and also make sure that it comes from a very broad stroke of the community. Representatives, residents that work at the university, representatives from different professions in the community. And before I end, I just wanted to say thank you to all the CPAC members that took the time to put this together. It paints our picture fairly accurately, and I really appreciate citizens coming out and giving back to their community in a really meaningful, thought-provoking way.
Okay, anything else? All right, then you've got enough to work with there, and if not, then we can go ahead and ask for adjournment. We have a motion and a second. Gil?
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
thank you. Closed.
Made it. 5:25 on the dot.